One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. One of the awesome things about podcasting is getting to discover other people that I may have never crossed paths with in any other way, like any other profession, any other career choice that I made. But today, I'm so excited to bring you today's guest because it's someone who's just as obsessed with podcasting, but she's also an expert when it comes to launching things. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? Today's interview is extra special because Steph Taylor came on my radar probably more than a year and a half ago. And I've followed what she's doing kind of at a distance. And just to be honest, I've totally admired how she teaches and her approach to helping other people launch products and get their podcast out into the world. So I was so excited whenever a mutual friend introduced us, and she was so excited to come on the podcast today. So Steph Taylor is a digital product launch strategist for business owners who are tired of selling services and want to scale with their first digital offer. Whether it's starting a podcast or selling a digital course, Steph helps her students reach more people, grow their audience, and become the go-to in their industry. She's host of the Socialette podcast with over 950,000 downloads to date and has taught more than 100,000 entrepreneurs how to launch their own podcast and digital products. In her spare time, Steph enjoys adding new plants to her indoor jungle and making wine, peanut butter, and coffee disappear. #magic. So I hope you enjoy my interview today with Steph. All right, Profit Podcast listeners, I'm so excited to introduce to you today someone who is equally obsessed with podcasting as I am, and that is Steph Taylor. Welcome to the show, Steph.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me, Crystal. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, this is going to be so much fun. So, Steph, can you tell everybody where you're located? Because I know it is bright and early in the morning for you today.
Yes, I'm in beautiful, sunny Brisbane, Australia, but the sun's not out yet. It's 6:15 a.m. and it is still dark outside.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So she was like, we're going to let the coffee kick in and we're really just going to get this conversation going. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And Australia, I have to say, actually, I didn't tell you this before we started recording. It is one of my favorite places on the planet. I went there when I was about 15 and it's just one of those, I just cannot wait. I want to go back so, so bad. I love it so much.
Yes. Oh, you need to come back. We can't wait to have you back.
Yes. Oh, well, I just want to dive into what it is that you do and how you got into the online space. Is this something that you've always done? Is it something that when you were a little girl, you just said, I would love to be a podcast coach and a launch strategist? Like, how did you actually come to do what you do today?
So funnily enough, I actually am an accountant by trade, which is like the weirdest. I don't even know how I fell into what I do now. I was an accountant. I was hating my job and I started side hustling. I started a little e-commerce side hustle business alongside my full-time job, and I was working. I was getting up at 4 a.m., working on my business, then going off to do a full 10-hour day at my corporate job, then coming home, having dinner, going to sleep, doing it all over again. And I got really burnt out. I actually got really sick. I ended up in hospital and I knew that something had to change. I went back to my corporate job. There was this massive mountain of work on my desk that nobody had replied to any of my emails that needed replying to. Nobody had done all of this paperwork. And I'd been on sick leave for 2 weeks. I was super sick and I just burst into tears. So that was the point where I knew I needed to get out of my corporate job. But unfortunately, my little side hustle wasn't really making that much money. So I ran out of money very, very quickly and had to go and get a job at a startup doing their digital marketing. And this was the best thing that could have possibly happened to me because that startup worked in a co-working space. And the person I was sitting across from in the co-working space had 2 podcasts and ran a podcasting agency. And he very quickly became a mentor of mine and helped me to realize that actually, yeah, I could launch a podcast as well. So while I was working at the startup doing their marketing, I started to think about how I could give the business thing another crack. I started to think about, oh, maybe I can do some marketing for clients. Maybe I could launch a marketing podcast because this was now 3 years ago. There weren't really that many marketing podcasts, or not as many as there are now. And I really loved the idea of maybe one day starting a podcast. I never quite felt ready. And I didn't really feel confident enough in my voice, but I knew that one day I wanted to do this. So fast forward then another year, and I'm in the process of building a marketing agency. I've started taking on all these clients. I've realized that for me to scale up, I need to either hire people, which is what I did, or work more hours. And I didn't want to do that. So I started hiring these people, started scaling up this marketing agency. And then I realized, actually, I don't like managing people. I want to be doing the marketing. I want to be teaching people how to market their business. I don't want to be managing people all day long. And it was kind of sad because I had to let go of the people who worked for me. I let go of all my clients and I doubled down on online courses. I ended up with a bunch of different online courses. I launched a podcast about marketing. I was the general marketing chick. Nobody really knew what I specialized in, but they came to me for all the free marketing advice. And I had this bite-sized online marketing podcast, and it was great. I had all these listeners. So I couldn't figure out why none of these listeners were buying the courses that I'd created. I was like, you guys are all coming to me for my free stuff, but why will you not buy my course about Facebook ads, my course about Instagram marketing, my course about email marketing? Where am I going wrong? And it took a little while before I realized that they saw me as the generalist. they would come to me for the free stuff. But as soon as it came to learning about their Facebook ads or about their Instagram, they went to the Facebook ads specialist or the Instagram specialist. And then I eventually ended up niching down. I knew I had to niche to be successful. And I knew that the one thing I loved doing and not many people enjoyed doing was launching. So kind of pivoted, kind of niched down into launching, retired all of my courses, which was terrifying because I'd put so much time into creating them. And that was now a year and a half ago, and it was the best decision I could have made.
Oh my gosh. Like I have 1,000 questions. The first one that I have is I just want to know, like, so you're in this season of life where you're just trying to figure it out, which is where so many of our listeners are right now. And you made those difficult decisions of, I feel this in my gut. I need to switch. Or maybe you just you knew like something was happening in the industry. There was a trend happening, or like, what was it that made you say, I've just got to take this in a different direction. And I know that it's going to be a tough decision. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I literally went broke. I had created this course about Instagram, and I launched it. I ran a webinar for it. I had 700 people registered for the webinar, bearing in mind that I had spent basically my only money I had left on Facebook ads to get people into this webinar because I knew I needed the cash into my business. Otherwise, I basically had to give up, and the webinar crashed. So then that was a day where there was a lot of tears. There were a lot of tears that entire week, a lot of wine. And I realized that, okay, I either need to go and apply for jobs or something needs to change in my business because it's not profitable the way that it is, the way that I'm running it at the moment, where I'm giving out so much free content, but nobody's coming to buy my stuff. And I wasn't quite ready to go to a job. I applied for some jobs. I actually got called to come in for an interview for one. And before I could even think about it, my brain was just like, no, thank you. I've already accepted a job elsewhere. So that for me was the signal, like, okay, I'm not ready to give up, but something needs to change.
Oh my gosh. I was just going to say, like, how hard it must have been to be like I imagine, like, in the cartoons where you have like the angel and the devil being like, okay, like, like we're done. And the other one, like, it like tugs on my heartstrings to know, like, when there's so many people out there that are probably either in the position that you were in, or they're still just like struggling, trying to figure out which direction do I go? Do I niche down? Do I get broader? Like, how does this really work? And I love hearing your story because I think that it's so common, but people that are not like, they're trying to transition in the online space, they think that they're the only ones that deal with that. So I thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's so important to understand that if you're experiencing this right now, you're not alone. Steph's been through it. I've been through it. I mean,
yeah, last week I shared an episode on my podcast called "If You're Thinking About Giving Up on Your Business, Listen to This." And so many people messaged me saying, wow, I thought I was the only one, but everyone else is dealing with it. There's so many of you dealing with it right now.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Like, this is so good. And the next question that I have is, I mean, we talked about launching. This is where you settled on, this is how I want to talk to people. This is the thing that I'm passionate about. So what is it about launching that gets you excited?
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
I think because it's this equal parts of mindset, it's fun, it's marketing, it's the things that I just love about business, because it's for a very short period of time, right? It's not like it's an ongoing thing that you always have to do that starts to feel like a chore in your business. When you're running a launch, it brings out the best in you and the worst in you. You get to play around with it. You get to experiment with it, and you get to just start to show up as a new business owner. And it allows you to level up as well. Like, I think a launch brings a lot of the mindset muck to the surface, and it's a really great opportunity to work on that kind of stuff as well.
Okay, so with that being said, I want to hear about the first thing you ever launched online. So you're coming from your corporate job. Tell me, do you have a good story from maybe the biggest mistake you made in your very first launch, or something that just went really well or really bad? We want all the dirt stuff. You got to share the story with us.
So my first launch, my first digital product launch was a Facebook ads course at the end of 2017. What had happened was my ex-partner and I decided we were moving to Europe. We were going traveling in Europe. He was moving over there. And I realized, okay, I have no savings. I need some money in the bank to be able to travel. Yes, I've got client income coming in, but I knew I wouldn't be able to do full-time client load while I was traveling. So I thought, okay, let me put together an online course and launch it. How hard can it be? As it turns out, when you don't have a structure to follow, it can be really hard. So I was the classic entrepreneur doing everything. So I was working part-time for a startup. I was running all of my client work. And then on the weekends, I was building this online course. And I launched it in October, and we were due to fly out to Europe on the 9th of November. So there was a very, very short time frame, and it was very much do or die. This has to work, which was the best thing that it could have been, because I had to get scrappy. A lot of the time I see people launching something and they'll be like, oh, it's day one, nobody's bought, I give up, it's a failure. Whereas I got to day 3 and the sales were still really low. So I thought, okay, what else can I do to amp up the sales? So I launched it with a 5-day challenge initially, but that didn't convert as well as I wanted it to. So I got to day 3 and I thought, okay, I don't really want to do a live webinar. It terrifies me, but I need this money so badly that I'm going to just do a live webinar. I wish I could find the recording right now, because it's probably the worst thing ever. I remember being so scared. I remember sitting there clicking the go live button, being like, I just hope nobody shows up. I really don't want to do this. And then people showed up and I raced through it. I was so nervous. I couldn't answer some people's questions. All of the worst nightmares came true, but people still bought, and it ended up being a successful launch, which it still blows my mind to this day, because I did a lot of the things that I teach wrong.
That's so awesome. I love that, most of the time, people that are in the online space, we stand up and we're the ones at the front of the room. We're the ones on the live webinars that we're teaching these things. But most often we're teaching from actual trial and error, like baptism by fire. We made the mistake. We're teaching this to you so you don't do the same thing. So I hope that anybody that's listening, just takes away from it that you just got started and it didn't have to be perfect. And I bet that having that deadline was probably everything, because if you're anything like me, if I don't have a deadline, I just keep pushing it off and saying, I'll get to that next month, next quarter, maybe even next year. That'll sound good. But do you see that a lot in your clients and your students and the people you work with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I get a lot of students coming through. So one of my courses teaches people how to launch their digital products. And I get a lot of students coming through saying, yeah, I'm going to launch it in the next 12 weeks because it's a 12-week course. And then they get about halfway through and it becomes, oh, I'll do it in 12 weeks. And then we get towards the end and it's like, oh, it's taking me longer. A lot of the time it's like, oh, I'm just stuck on, I can't decide what to name my course, so I'm not going to launch anything yet. I can't decide which thing to launch first, so I'm not going to launch either of them. And it ends up being these tiny little things that we fixate on, and it's our brain's way of keeping us safe, because for us, it feels safe and comfortable to obsess about the name of our course, or to obsess about how much to price it at, or to obsess about which one to launch first. That feels a lot more comfortable than doing the unknown thing, which is actually taking that action on the launch and getting it out there. So we try to stay in that comfort zone instead of doing something completely different. And it's not until you decide, okay, I'm going to do it, and I commit to doing something different, that's when the magic starts to happen. But until then, you're going to find that you start to obsess over those little details. But that's normal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm just thinking about everybody that's in our audience right now that is like, oh, that's me with my podcast. They're like, I've been obsessing, like I've been down the Google rabbit hole of like, well, this name is kind of similar, so I can't use that. She need to ditch that idea. And then this one, like, oh, it's kind of in the same category, but not really. And I don't know if my voice is good enough. Like, I mean, I bet you and I could go on for hours with all of the excuses that people.
Oh man. Yes, I went down those rabbit holes as well for a long time. I sat on the idea of my podcast for about 6 months, and I actually remember my mentor and friend who ran the podcasting agency, I went to him and I told him my idea for my podcast, and his reaction was, I don't know if that's going to work. So that kind of set me further back as well, because my podcast is a very different concept to what was out there at the time. Mine's 5 to 10 minutes long. There are these little bite-sized episodes back when everyone was doing interview length podcasts. So that kind of set me back. Plus I've lived in 3 different countries. My accent has been all over the place my entire life. And you know, when we first moved from South Africa to New Zealand when I was 8 years old, I got bullied for having a weird accent. I was the kid who spoke weird. Then when I moved from New Zealand to Australia nearly 10 years ago, I got bullied. Well, I didn't get bullied, but I got, you know, all the grown-ups I worked with, they said, oh, you speak like a New Zealander, ha, ha, ha. So I've always been very self-conscious of my voice. And that was the biggest hurdle for me with starting a podcast. I was like, I don't know, do people actually want to hear my voice? Do people also want to hear, do I have anything of value to share with people, was the other big mindset issue. And it wasn't until I set a date, I said, okay, I'm launching my podcast on May 1st, 2018. I think I decided this at the end of March. So I had just over a month to launch this podcast. But I decided, you know what, I'm doing it and it's going to happen regardless of anything that gets in the way. I'm just going to do it. And it finally happened.
Okay, well, I want to go back to your voice for a second, because I hear this a lot. People say, I don't like my accent, or I don't like I'm too loud, I'm too quiet. And they try to, which to me, you and I both know they're all excuses, but you know, but how did you kind of quiet that noise in your head? How did you push past the insecurity or, you know, just the uncomfortableness of like, I just don't really like how I say this one word, or maybe I breathe too much? Like, how did you listen to your own episodes? I'm assuming, did you edit your own podcast, and you're just like, how do you push past that?
Yeah, for me, podcasting has been what's helped me to learn to love my voice. And I didn't love my voice back at the start. I really didn't. But I realized that I had something to share with people. I had things that they could learn from me, and they couldn't learn from me unless I pushed past that and got my voice out there. And it was like, am I so self-centered that I'm going to let my dislike of my voice, my fear of what people are going to think of my voice, stop me from being able to help other people? And I realized, no, it's not about me, it's about them. But funnily enough, through podcasting, I've learned how to modulate my voice better. I've learned how to pronounce words better. I've learned my enunciations better, and I've learned how to become a better speaker as a result. So now, if I look back 400 episodes ago when I started, I think, wow, I speak so differently now to how I spoke back then. And it's all because of podcasting.
Oh my gosh. I think that you just gave somebody a huge gift right now. That's been the thing holding them back. It's like, I don't like my voice. I don't like my voice. But Steph just said, it's not about me. It's about my message, because it's like that's just, it's what I preach. And it's so important because we all have our little quirks. I mean, I'm from Texas, y'all. I am born and raised in Texas. And I had people in Texas ask me, where are you from? Like, that's too country. Like, it's almost like I'm too Texas sometimes. And I'm like, I've been here my whole life. But anyway, you know, I just show up as myself. And I think that's what's most important. Like you said, just embracing who you are and stepping into that, because I love that you said it's made you a better speaker and it's made you love your voice because I mean, I'm going to tell you, you have a beautiful voice and I follow
Oh,
you on
thank you.
Instagram. I follow you on Instagram and I love it when you pop on there and I'm like, oh, what is Steph going to share today? So I think that that's so cool because
Oh,
we all have these quirks and these things with our voices and that's how you stand out. I just truly believe that. Do you agree with like when people ask you like, oh, my category is too overcrowded in this market, like there's no
mm.
way I'm going to stand out. What kind of advice would you give to someone that's saying that?
Yeah, I love that question because there are so many podcasts out there now. There's like over 1 million, I think, just in Apple Podcasts alone. So to stand out in your category, you need to do something that nobody else is doing, or you need to be I mean, if you stand out naturally with your voice and who you are, that's one great way to stand out. But you also need to pick a topic or some kind of angle that is going to help you to stand out. So, yeah, marketing might be a really saturated category, but within the marketing category, my podcast, so I ended up pivoting my podcast when I niched down. My podcast is bite-sized. So that's one way that it stands out from everyone else because most of the other podcasts are like an hour long and it's all about launching. As far as I know, I don't think there are any other podcasts that are just about launching. So that's my little category, my little slice of the podcasting market that I've carved out for myself. And that is great because it means that I'm getting different guests onto my show when I do have guests. It means that I'm talking about different topics to everyone else. And it really has cemented my little place rather than having to try and compete against everyone else who's in the exact same category as me.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's so helpful to hear the different perspective of the format. You know, it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm making it shorter. Like they're going long, I'm going short. Or, you know, maybe a podcast is doing all interviews. Maybe you throw in some solo shows or doing like there's so many different options. And this is why I love podcasting is there's no hard and fast rules that say you can only do it one way. And I love that. Have you seen like an evolution of your show over time, or is the way that you started it the way that it is today?
No, it's evolved so much over time. So when I started it, it was a bite-sized online marketing show. I talked about everything from Facebook ads to general marketing strategy to Instagram to Pinterest to just everything. And I also did a lot more interviews back then. Over time, it's become about launching, and it's also become a lot of the behind the scenes of my own business. It's become a lot of mindset, a lot of, hey, this is what I was struggling with. Maybe you'll be struggling with it as well. I try to share a lot of the real stories behind it. And I stopped doing interviews mainly. I do a couple, but really not that many because I realized that I don't enjoy doing interviews as much as I enjoy doing the solo episodes. My listeners come to me for the solo episodes. They go elsewhere to listen to interviews. So I've really honed in on what my listeners want. Every year I survey my audience. I send them a little survey called How Can I Help Me to Help You? And that gives me content ideas. I look at what questions people are asking me, and I just make sure that I'm giving them exactly what they want. And what they want has changed over the 3 years since I launched it. And that's great. So I'm just being flexible with what I deliver, and it's probably going to keep on changing into the future as my audience grows along with me.
No, this is so helpful because I think that there's people listening and I know, and I'm sure you can absolutely talk to this part of the launching phase. They're like, yeah, but I could do this and I could possibly do this. And we're constantly thinking of like the 17 other ways that we could run our business, or maybe I should do a membership too. And maybe I should have a private podcast and maybe I could do this. And there's so many shiny objects constant. It's like they're chasing us. Like we're not necessarily chasing all the shiny objects. They're coming like, I'm running in the other direction. Like, go, I'm trying to put my blinders on, like, stay away. And I think it's such a gift to tell people it's okay to pivot in the future. It's okay to rebrand if you get started, but don't let that hold you back from launching that thing that you are so excited to launch.
Exactly. This is the thing. Everything about your podcast can be changed. You can change the name. You can change the cover art. You can change the show description. You can delete all of your episodes. If you go back and listen to episode 1 of my podcast, 400 episodes ago, you will be surprised. It's such a different show to what it is now. I'm a different person. My intro music my intro voiceover and everything was different. The music's still the same. That's the one thing that stayed the same. But everything, you can change literally everything in your show. So don't get too caught up on little details, and don't let those little details that you can change stop you from launching your show.
Oh, this is so good. And I think that it's really important for people to just understand that it's a journey. It's a process. I don't have all the answers. Steph is like, I'm constantly evolving. Things are always changing. But I want to pivot real fast to talk about podcasting in general and the industry. And what are your thoughts on all the things that I feel like this year especially has just been like, Apple's doing this and Spotify's doing this. And there's like, what's the thing that has you most excited about podcasting right now?
Yeah. So it's funny you say all of those different things that have been happening this year. Part of me gets really curious, and then part of me just wants to put my blinders on and keep focusing on what I'm doing. I am really excited at the moment about people monetizing their podcasts with digital products. I know that Apple has now brought out a paid subscription model, and all of these different shiny things are happening. But at the moment, I still think that you can't go wrong with having a solid product that solves a problem for your listeners and monetizing your podcast with that. I think that is going to be a timeless strategy. I am a big favor of doing the timeless things rather than just chasing the latest tactics. Obviously there are going to be some tactics that work, and it's about finding that balance of strategy and tactics. But I think having that solid product that you can consistently use to monetize your podcast, that's going to be timeless.
So I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Step Brothers, but I'm thinking of that scene where they're like, did we just become best friends? Like, this is exactly what I preach and everything, because you're right. It's a timeless strategy to create a platform that has an audience of people that are just so interested and inspired by what you do. And then being able to turn around and serve them in a way that only you can is just, it's never going to go out of style. It's like it's the gift that keeps on giving, because it allows you to show up, help people in your community, but also they give you the information of, this is what we want next. And this is where we want you to take us on this journey. And I think it's just so cool. And listening to what they have to say is so valuable. I often see people saying like, yeah, I want to monetize my podcast with a product, but I just haven't had a good idea yet. And I'm like, have you spoken to your audience? Have you asked your listeners, how can I help you? Because finding out what their problems are is going to be the biggest clue. That's going to tell you, oh, there's potential to create a product over here, or they need some help with this particular thing. So I'm going to create something that solves that for them. That's where you're going to get your idea from. It's just listen to your listeners. So where do you typically engage with your audience? Because this is always a really good question that people in our community have. Like, do I have a Facebook group? Should I have an email list? And like, which is the best place that you find that your audience really engages?
Yeah. For me, it's Instagram and email. So often they will reply to my emails when I send out my weekly emails. But Instagram's the easiest. They'll send me DMs over there. But just because it's the best for me doesn't mean it's the best. If you're somebody who likes running a Facebook group, then the Facebook group's good. The best place for you to connect with your listeners is the place that you can do it consistently, and ideally on a platform that they use. So if they don't use Facebook anymore, then maybe a Facebook group's not a great idea. If they're not on Instagram, then that's not a great idea. So it really is somewhere that you can consistently commit to showing up for them and being reachable, and then just being able to give them that call to action, like, hey, come and connect with me over on Instagram, or come and meet me inside my Facebook group. And over time, it'll be a slow process, but over time, they'll start to come and meet you on that other platform. And that's a great thing, because now you've suddenly got them on two different platforms. You've got those two separate touch points. You've got them somewhere where they can have that conversation back with you. It's not just you talking to them, but now they're talking back to you. And that's where you start to build that connection.
Oh, this is so good, because I think that, hearing you say it's not just Instagram and email is the end all be all. It's like whatever works best for you is something that is really important for every podcaster to understand. I have people that will tell me, well, LinkedIn is my place. I'm like, awesome.
Yeah.
I hang out there. Like, just go wherever your people are, go find them and talk to them. And because a lot of new podcasters get really discouraged when they say, well, they're not talking back. They're not engaging back with me. And I don't know if you've seen that a lot in your audience, but what advice would you give to someone they're doing everything they can? They're sending the emails, they're posting on social, and they're like, I'm still not getting traction. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah. So my first bit of advice is stick with it. Don't give up just yet. It takes a while. This is a long game. This isn't going to be a quick overnight success. And then my second tip is start looking at how you can get in front of other people's audiences. Can you get onto other people's podcasts? I mean, being on other people's podcasts is a great way to reach other people who listen to podcasts. So that's a really great way to get in front of someone's audience. Can you teach a masterclass to somebody's membership or somebody's online course? Can you collaborate with a brand who has followers or an audience who are the same kind of people you're trying to reach? Can you write a guest post for somebody's blog? How can you get in front of these other audiences that people have built and then give them the call to action to go back and listen to your podcast? That's really such a great way to start to grow that podcast and get that traction a little bit quicker. But it all takes a long time. It's not like, oh, I just went viral. My podcast went viral. That doesn't happen really. I don't think I've heard of anyone whose podcast has suddenly gone viral.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that it happens on other platforms. It's like, oh, you had this one YouTube video that skyrocketed to millions of views overnight. And I've never heard that happening in the podcasting space. Well,
no, neither.
Well, I was going to switch gears real fast, and I want to go into some rapid fire questions. But since you do a lot of the similar things that I do when it comes to helping podcasters and getting their shows launched, I'm going to tweak them just a little bit. So the original question is, what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster? But I want to go even further and say, what piece of advice would you give to someone that's listening right now and they're just putting off that launch? They're not getting their podcast launched. What piece of advice would you give to them?
I would say, that's a really great question. I would say, how much longer do you want to put off the impact that you can have? How much longer do you want to sit back and not help the people who you could be helping with your podcast? Because your answer to that question is going to tell you how important it is to you to launch that podcast. And I think you're going to realize that actually it's something you really want to do, and it's going to give you a voice. It's going to help you to help more people. And you're going to you'll be amazed at how many people you can impact once you get your podcast out there, even if you don't think you have anything to offer. So yeah, how much longer do you want to put off helping people?
I feel like you just threw down a gauntlet. Like the challenge has been laid. Steph's like, okay, hang on. Like let's make this happen. This is so good.
It's tough love. Like I love giving out a little bit of tough love. Sometimes we need it.
Yes, absolutely. So for anybody that's listening, like let's think about this and let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. Okay, my next question, it's a 2-part question. What is the dream podcast you would love to be on? And who is your dream podcast guest?
Oh, I think the dream podcast I would love to be on is Amy Porterfield's Online Marketing Made Easy, because that was the very first podcast I listened to. So for me, in my mind, when I think of podcasts, I'm like, that is the podcast. So that's my dream podcast guest. Oh, I've never thought about that question before. My dream podcast guest, maybe Gabby Bernstein. I'd love to chat to Gabby Bernstein.
Awesome.
I think she's just so interesting. Her books were probably some of the first books around mindset and spirituality that I started reading as a business owner. So she's had a huge impact on my business.
Awesome. Oh, those are two great. Like, yeah. So we're putting it out in the universe. It's going to happen. Happen.
Yes. I love it.
Okay. My last question is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
I used to be, but now I've really stepped back and I've realized it's more about the bigger picture than the little details. If my podcast has a little mistake in it, I don't even edit them out anymore. I don't edit my podcasts. So a lot of people are quite surprised when I tell them I don't edit. I literally just hit record. If I make a mistake, I'll pause it while I'm recording and go back over and record over the mistake. But that's it. So No, I'm not really a perfectionist anymore, but it used to get in the way of me launching things and me getting ideas out into the world. So I think it's almost like there's this balance between you can be a perfectionist or you can have an impact. You can't have both.
Okay, so again, going back to, did we just become best friends? Because this is 100% my philosophy as well. Everybody that's listening to the show knows I don't do a lot of editing either. I think it's our time can be spent elsewhere, engaging with our community, making a bigger impact. And so I just love we're totally on the same page. And I'm a recovering perfectionist as well. That's the title that we like to use. So
I love it.
Well, Steph, if anybody's listening and they're like, oh my gosh, like I love this girl, I want to go connect with her. Where can people find you online and learn more about your programs and the amazing products that you offer?
Yes. So I have a podcast it's called Socialette. You can find it in all of the podcast apps and also at stephtaylor.co/podcast. The best place to connect with me is over on Instagram. You can find me there at stephtaylor.co. I love to hear from everyone. And I have a free digital product kickstart kit for anyone who is thinking of potentially monetizing their podcast with a digital product. You can grab that at stephtaylor.co/kit.
Awesome. And we're going to have a link to everything in the show notes. Y'all go follow Steph. I love, I was looking at, I think it was yesterday or today, you do a lot of polls on Instagram. And this is actually the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because whenever people ask me, well, how do I start surveying my audience? I always say that's the easiest place to get started. So do you have a lot of success, like kind of getting feedback from your audience that way?
Yeah. So here's a little tip, but when you put your polls on your Instagram stories, it actually ups how many people see it. So a lot more, your story reaches a lot more people because people are engaging with it.
Awesome.
So it's a really, really powerful way of surveying your audience and reaching more people.
Okay, so you heard it here. You got to go follow Steph on Instagram and you got to go participate in her polls, because that feedback is just, it's so important, and it will encourage you to start doing your own polls on Instagram and getting that feedback from your audience for sure. Oh, yes. Steph, we could have talked for like 4 more hours about, hopefully we can do this again, because this was so much fun. But thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Crystal. This has been awesome.
So what did you think? Oh my gosh. Like our conversation, I told her whenever we were done recording, we could have kept going for hours. And I think we both wanted to. It was funny because of the way the time difference with her being in Australia, it hit just perfectly where she was waking up for the day and I had just had my afternoon coffee. So we were both like really into it. We just wanted to keep talking and keep chatting. So I hope that you found this conversation helpful. Make sure you go to the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 278 to connect with Steph and learn more about the courses that she offers and all the services that she has available for people that are wanting to launch something. I'm so happy to, like I said in the beginning, have crossed paths with Steph in a way that may not otherwise be possible if I wasn't on this podcasting journey. So I'm so grateful to have conversations like this and bring other experts to you that you can learn from and you can connect with, and honestly, that I can geek out with, because y'all, it is a rare find to find somebody that is as obsessed with podcasting as I am. And I'm so glad that Steph and I have found each other and connected. So again, the show notes are crystalprofit.com/episode 278. Go connect with Steph, go follow her on social media. And I hope that you follow up with her, because she really is so much fun to watch on Instagram. And I am cheering her on as a fellow podcast enthusiast. But that's all I have for you today. So if this is your first time tuning in, make sure you hit the subscribe, follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.